I think that Handsome is sort of a mystery band around that time, because I think some people believe that it was a band that was like, formed by a major label to like get signed and kind of take advantage of that post-hardcore, post-rock thing that was happening at the time. It wasn't the case at all. The band was formed by Peter Mangaday, who was an Australian guy who was in Helmet during the Strap It On and Meantime records, and I think he was let go from the band and then replaced by Rob Echeverria in Helmet, and he formed the band with this guy Eddie Nappy, who I think he met literally at Tompkins Square Park in the East Village, because I think Eddie recognized Peter and was like, "Aren't you in Helmet?" And he was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "We should form a band," and they were into that post rock, that chugga chugga helmety type thing that was happening at the time. And then they got Pete Hines, who had just, I think he was finishing up his degree in Boston, got an English degree, and he was the former drummer of Murphy's Law and the Cro-Mags, and I think he spent a little time in Agnostic Front, and he was in some other, it was the 90s, so he had like kind of moved on. He was playing, I can't remember the band he played in Brooklyn, but it was like a rock band that he was playing in for a while. So they were a band for a little bit before when I still lived in Utah. And let's see, I had quit Iceburn here in Salt Lake City, and I had formed this band called Lumberjack with Matt Mateus, and a couple of other dudes. This guy Jeff Johnson, who's been in New York forever now too, but they were all Salt Lakers, and Andy Patterson was our drummer, and he's like a guy with a studio here in Salt Lake, and he records tons of hardcore and metal bands, and I think from all over the place. He's a great dude. And we had gotten to the end of that band, and I was fried. I was like doing college, and I was sort of tired of Salt Lake. Felt really small at the time. This was like pre-internet, pre-cell phone, so it felt like I knew all the places, I knew all the people, and I was just like, I was over it. And I had a real big fascination with New York City. I loved all the hardcore from there when I was a kid, and I thought the city was just like, otherworldly. And I was friends with Richie, who was in Youth of Today, and then sang for Into Another. And Into Another came through Salt Lake City, and I think I was just desperately asking questions about New York, like what's it like, and we used to I had all these pen pals from around I think I talked about this on the Where It Went podcast, but I was a super pen pal guy. Richie was one of my pen pals, and then we used to call each other. I said, are you guys going on tour anytime, in the spring? I think this was 1993. And do you need help? And he was like, yeah, we need some help. We're going on tour. Do you want to come? And I was like, yes. I'll quit school. I'll quit college. I'll just stop everything, and I want to go on tour. And he's like, okay, I think we've got probably 3 months of work for you. You can come out, sell T-shirts, help drive the van. This is sort of like the end of the hardcore days before it was a big business, when it was you would just take your friends out and they would help you drive the van and sell T-shirts and load gear and all that. I didn't have, I didn't have the title of tour manager or anything like that. So I went out with them, and I ended up staying. A bunch of their shows got canceled. I ended up staying in New York for 10 days, and during that time, I sort of I was exploring the city. I didn't know much about it, so I was going out and exploring the city. Richie had lots of stuff to do, so I happened to meet some of the people who were living at the Equal Vision house at the time. I'm blanking on names right now. Luke Hoverman and oh shoot. Anyway, they took, and I ended up sort of hanging out with Scoots, who was in Texas Is the Reason, not at the time, but he and his roommates were Brian and Glenn Mariansky, these brothers. I eventually ended up being in Jets to Brazil with Brian Mariansky, but it was years later. And I remember hearing about this band Handsome that was in New York, and I was like, that's an awesome name. And they were like, yeah, it's got Peter, this guy who used to be in Helmet, and Pete Hines are in the band. And they have this singer dude, and I guess the singer was like kind of a 90s grunge guy. He was like one of those, yeah, 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 like not yeah, 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 the band, but like a Creed guy,
I was
like
just thinking Creed when you said that.
Yeah, like a third generation like Pearl Jam dude who was like had that like growly voice, and I was like, that sounds like a cool band. And then I heard like they might be looking for a singer. Anyway, fast forward 6 months, and I had moved to New York. I was like, all right, I'm moving to New York. I want to go out there and like try my luck. And I think I initially moved out there with thoughts of going to the new school and studying English, and that didn't pan out. Really, I just wanted to be in a band. And I went to a Christmas party with Richie's sister, Allison, and she was friends with Arthur from, Gorilla Biscuits, and Arthur was in Handsome at the time, because Eddie had either quit or been kicked out for a spell, and he showed up at this Christmas party with Pete Hines, and Pete, was like, he's a funny dude. He cornered me and was like, "Oh, this little guy from Utah, who are you?" And I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Wait, you're in this band called Handsome, right?" And he's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Well, what's it like?" And he's like, "It's cool. We have this singer, we don't like him. We're trying to find a new singer." And I was like, "Well, I'm a singer. Can I come try out?" I had been in New York for like 3 weeks. I was still like trying to figure out where the hell I was all the time. And he's like, "Yeah." And so we casually set up a rehearsal, like a tryout. And I went down, and it was crazy. I was kind of used to being in hardcore bands with my friends, and that we had formed and like planned, and they basically like had me into one of their rehearsals. It was Arthur, Peter Mengede, and Pete Hines, and they were like, we're going to play a couple songs. Why don't you just stand up and sing? And I was like, oh wow, okay, just like that, just sing. So I had my like notebook of poetry and words, and so I did that. And then Pete took me home back to Brooklyn, and he was like, "Hey, we'll call you in a couple of days." So Peter called me, and he was like, "Here's this tape. Rewrite the lyrics to a couple of these songs. Come back." And they ended up taking me into their band, and Arthur quit the band to go do Civ, because Civ was just starting, and Eddie came back to the band, and then not long after that, Quicksand had broken up. One of the sort of, I think they broke up several times, but they had broken up, and we had convinced Tom to come play with us. So that's how and then we were like this sort of five-piece band. And it was at this time when there were major labels like swarming at all the shows in New York. So we played CBGBs with Girls Against Boys and this band Walt Mink, who I used to love actually. And I remember getting, just cards and handshakes, and I'm a lawyer, I represent blah, blah, blah. I'm an A&R guy. And I was like, whoa, this is wild. And I remember Peter saying to me, "We're going to be signed within the year." And I was like, "You're nuts." And he was like, "No, trust me, watch what's going to happen." There was just like it was like a feeding frenzy for major labels at the time. They were going after every band. And I think, we had this like sort of like supergroup tag. I think I was probably the most, Eddie and I were the most like kind of unknown guys in the band, but we got signed. I think we got signed about 9 months later.
So he was right. So he was right within the year.
He was right. We took like, we took trips out to LA with like this guy Andy that used to run Virgin, and then this label called the Work Group, which was another Sony label, and then Michael Goldstone from Epic, and there were a couple of others. Mike Gitter at the time worked for Atlantic, and he had taken us out a bunch of times, and we ended up signing with Michael Goldstone, who was like the A&R guy for Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine, Shudder to Think, lots of bands, Screaming Trees. And
is that why you guys kind of went with them? You looked at the track record of okays with these bands, and I mean, also, I mean, within those bands, I know I might be thinking, okay, wait, they're dealing with Shudder to Think, so they're going to be open to us being maybe a bit different than some of their older stuff.
Sure. Yeah, he had bands from all over the map. He had this band called the Dirt Merchants too, which I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think Nels Klein played in the band or played with some of the band members too. But you know who Nels Klein is?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yes, that was one of the deals. We were like, oh, Shudder to Think is very strange. We were fans, but and they had come kind of from the Discord scene, which was like, I thought that was like crazy that a Discord band was signing to a major label. But and at the time, Michael was trying to sign Rancid, and anyway, he it was all, you know, I was 23. It was all very impressive for me, and like my mind was blown. They would have us like up to the top of the Sony building and for lunch and weird meetings with business people that I didn't understand. Anyway, it took us a while to make up our minds, but we decided to sign with Goldstone, and we were kind of off on our journey. Before that, we had been playing a lot around New York and doing weekends, playing in like Baltimore and Rhode Island and all these spots, you know, around the New York area. But after that, it was like we got serious about making demos for the label, getting ready to record a record, and then, you know, getting set up with like a booking agent and getting ready to go on tour. So that was kind of the story. But I think to people outside the area or the scene, we looked like a band that had just popped up out of nowhere, and we're like, hey, we're here. We got signed to a label. Now we're going to do, you know. So I think some people thought it was a little gross because at the time, because it seemed a little bit like put together as like a money making machine, which it definitely, like, I didn't make any fucking money off that band. Or, you know, just this thing that where we were like, we were taking advantage of the kind of major label feeding frenzy at the time.